We're always just one weather hiccup away from a complete catastrophe when you're talking about the oil seed side of things. So, although today, we're still waiting on on details or on China to confirm if these amounts that were touted by US representatives, if those amount of soybeans will actually be purchased. Some of the specifics are there.
Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we're joined by Susan Stroud, founder of No Bull Ag and a straight-talking analyst who cuts through the noise in grain and commodity markets. Susan focuses on what matters for producers: price risk, basis move, logistics, politics, and real-world signals behind the headlines. With a boots-on-the-ground perspective and data to back it up, she delivers clear, actionable insights for farmers and ag investors alike. Get ready for a no-fluff dive into what's moving agriculture right now. Susan, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yes, let's start out like I always like to start these interviews. And what is your macro view of the agricultural sector right now?
We are in the policy business right now. And it's actually, most people don't think of agriculture as being the policy business, but truth be told, it's always been like that. It's especially in the forefront now as we have trade policies that have created an incredible amount of headwinds, and then just this epic roller coaster ride that we've been on for months now. Additionally, we are in the middle of some of the largest biofuel policy changes potentially in US history. And so that is also having a tremendous impact on markets.
Okay, I've heard this, but I don't really understand it. Why does the government meddle so much in agricultural policies? It kind of seems like whoever Uncle Sam decides is going to wins, and they just subsidize the heck out of it. And am I off here, or can you go into more detail?
I mean, I guess that's a fair assessment. Um, but it does, you have to think about food security, is one thing. And, our place in the world as US agriculture, we've been known as the nation that feeds the world. One of the things that really that's no doubt helped us kind of drive to be an ag powerhouse or an early powerhouse in the world would be our inland waterways system. And so we naturally have river transportation that's less expensive than other means of transportation. And it's been our infrastructure that really helped drive US agriculture to the forefront. Now the problem is that we're facing tremendous headwinds, competition out of South America. Brazil is now, a lot of us in US ag hate to hear it, but Brazil is the most important agricultural supplier to the world. And that's something that's really changed a lot just the past. It's accelerated in a huge way over the course of the past decade plus. And it's also playing a big role in US China relations, as China has done nothing but strengthen its ties with Brazil between the first trade war and today.
What are some of the direct competition? Is it like soybeans or what? Coffee. I
Yeah,
know we get a lot of coffee from Brazil.
soybeans is first and foremost, or what comes to mind for both. Brazil also killed the U.S. cotton market. The list of commodities goes on. They started to do it in corn, but they've here the past couple of years, they have a growing corn ethanol industry in Brazil. And so that's helping keep a lot of Brazilian bushels of corn off the export market now. That's kind of helped revive the US program here the past couple of years.
So is what the government, I'm guessing, is what they'll do is they'll subsidize if Brazil is taking over the cotton market, will they subsidize U.S. farmers and give them more money to kind of bridge the gap there? Is that what they're doing?
It's one of those things where the U.S. government isn't really necessarily involved. I mean, as we look at declining farm incomes here in the U.S., we continue to produce more bushels or bales of cotton than ever before. Actually, U.S. cotton production is down substantially, but that's because profitability is down as well, and Brazil being a huge factor there. But in the US, our problem is that we were producing, our supply is far outweighing the demand that we do have. We've been dealing with it on the bean side of things, honestly, even kind of ahead of US China trade issues. We had a building bean balance sheet, and that's just because we're continuing to lose market share as far as exports go to countries like Brazil.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to get into some of the listener questions here. Maybe I should have led this. This is my fault. Go ahead and give us your background and how you got into agriculture and how that led to your service today.
Sure, I grew up on a small farm in southeast Missouri, but was not involved in row crops at all. It was just cattle and pasture. I ended up I spent, I guess, 15 years or so of my career working for two large grain companies. Both of those jobs, I was working at a facility along the Mississippi River in the St. Louis area. And so it was my job to communicate with producers to buy their bushels of corn, soybeans, wheat, and sorghum, bringing them in on truck. And then we would load bushels out on barge that would be shipped down the Mississippi River, then put on a vessel and exported out the US Gulf. So I spent the majority of my life in physical markets like that. And I always had a passion for writing, and I kind of became more analytical as time went on. And I was able to, after leaving the physical markets, able to turn that into an email. I have a Substack at present where I have an email subscription service. And then I also do speaking engagements and things where talking about grain and oilseed markets.
That's cool. That is cool. Um, what which of the grains or seed oils are you bullish on over the next 12 months? Wheat,
Seed
corn,
oils,
soybeans,
goodness.
soybean oil. How do you feel?
I haven't heard the seed oils thing in a while. I thought that finally calmed down a little bit. Yeah, I think that some of the most interesting markets to be mindful of would be what we refer to as vegetable oil markets. So that does include the seed oils that you mentioned. Soybean oil is our predominant vegetable oil here in the US that we're using not only for food, but in biofuel applications. And that's what makes it a very interesting market. Same goes for palm oil. So, the thing about vegetable oils or seed oils is they're all interchangeable. So we can use palm in some applications that we can also use soybean oil for. A lot of those would be they're either food or they're going to be industrial like biofuels. And their price relationships matter a lot. So when you have a very tight palm market, then soybean oil will react and vice versa. Going forward here, as I mentioned before, we have some huge changes to biofuel policies on the horizon. Not only do we have on a global scale mandates that keep increasing with each passing year, but then also here in the US, we have changes to 45Z, which is the clean fuel production tax credit. It's raising the subsidy that the government is paying out on biomass-based diesel. So that is biodiesel and renewable diesel that would be produced making soybean oil. It's going to nearly triple the credit, double to triple depending on the fuel, beginning in 2026. So that's one plus. Additionally, we're waiting right now on the final rule from EPA. for the mandated volumes of biofuels required to be blended into U.S. petroleum fuel supplies for 2026 and 27. What we know so far is that EPA has proposed some new guidelines that would make it more advantageous to use domestic feedstocks like US grown and processed soybean oil. So that's something that stands to really change the game for soybean oil as we head into the new year. But the issue is that we've had a few delays along the way that's only been further delayed by the government shutdown. And so it's looking at this point like it won't be until the first part of 2026 that we see those guidelines released. But at the end of the day, this administration has signaled that it has an America First energy policy and it looks to support domestic feedstocks. And so for that reason, I think there's a lot of opportunity for soybean oil ahead, but unfortunately, it all falls in the hands of the government at this point.
Okay. So we use soybean oil. I'll pull up the chart here of soybean oil futures, and so we use this for um, food, I guess, for cooking, and we also use it for fuel. I was unaware of that.
Yeah, so this year, actually, this marketing year will be the first year that we use more soybean oil in the United States for fuel than we do for food.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
And
it's a
and they're
huge
blending this
change.
and making diesel out of it. Is that what you said?
Correct. Yep. So we've always made biodiesel from soybean oil here in the US, but it was not until after about 2000, 2021 that we really started to see as California's low carbon fuel standard really started to ramp up their declining emissions targets. Renewable diesel became a thing. So that's kind of the latest biofuel craze, and it's really driven by California's low carbon fuel standard. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is who we have to thank for higher soybean oil prices,
Who,
going
I'm
way
sorry, who
back
do
to
we have to
US
think?
governor. Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Oh,
in the mid 2000s, when he was governor of California, he commissioned California's EPA to create the world's first low carbon fuel standard that legislates a reduction in the carbon emissions of fuels sold in California and into California. And so, because of that, we saw it resulted in the renewable diesel boom. So, just as biodiesel is a biofuel made of soybean oil, renewable diesel is the same in that it can be made from soybean oil, waste fats, greases. But the difference is that biodiesel has a blending limit. It also has some restrictions in colder weather, and you have to have separate infrastructure for it. With renewable diesel, it can be blended one for one. It's chemically identical to petroleum diesel. And so that's really what set off this boom in renewable fuels and really changed the role of soybean oil in not only ag markets, but in energy markets as well. Soybean oil now trades like an energy commodity. Soybean oil and heating oil will nearly move in lockstep. The only reason we've kind of seen the two stray here recently is just because of, I think, diesel markets seeing more concern, economic headwinds from U.S.-China relations and that sort of thing. We've seen soybean oil rally, over the summer months because of biofuel policy optimism, and now we're definitely tapping the brakes and have flatlined, and that's because the market is terribly uncertain as we're heading into the very end of 25, knowing that we have a lot of new regulations taking effect on January 1st, and we don't have definitive guidance from the government on those yet.
huh.
We just
So a
went down a
policy,
rabbit hole.
yeah, yeah. So a policy that he put in place 25 years ago is affecting the soybean market today.
Yeah, go figure. Yeah, it's been a very interesting. The deeper you get into biofuels, the more you realize that it's all interconnected and it's all very messy. And it's government policy after government policy that really has shaped biofuels and then feedstock markets, which a feedstock is just simply what are you making that biofuel out of? This is where I'm not certain if you've heard about the used cooking oil imports, the US importing billions of pounds of waste greases from China.
No, I haven't heard this.
Yeah, so that's been a big thing, and thankfully policy that took effect the start of this year. Uh, Kind of it shut out imported used cooking oil from being used in biomass-based diesel production.
Wow. Okay. Um, let me tap on that for a minute. So we're importing used cooking oil from China because of some policies that we have. That this seems kind of
Yes.
nuts.
Yeah. Yes. So the American taxpayer has been subsidizing waste oil imports, not only from China, but from in 2024, Indonesia and Malaysia both hit the top five. And the problem with that is that both Indonesia and Malaysia they're the world's largest producers and exporters of palm oil, which is considered to be the dirtiest or the least green of any oils or feedstocks available. So, yeah, the government, we've legislated ourselves into a mess that they're actively trying to correct now here in 2025 and going into 2026. But it's a host of unintended consequences.
You sound like you're as just as big of a fan of the government as I am.
Uh, I suppose it gives me something to talk about. It's good for business, but yeah, it's really frustrating when you see because it's a recurring theme. It doesn't matter. I don't think it really matters if it's agriculture, if it's biofuels specifically, or something else. You have the government that makes some sort of policy decision, and then unfortunately, you have all these other things that come about because of it. Either it puts the hurts on some particular industry or they leave a loophole like this, where you have these refineries that are importing billions of pounds of waste oil that's labeled waste oil and probably not even waste oil at that, that we're subsidizing biofuel production, that the US taxpayer is subsidizing biofuel production, making it out of something that they used a fraudulent loophole to get it into the system. So. Yeah, there's never a dull moment.
Yeah. Um, okay. Which of the grains or seed oils are you bearish on over the next 12 months?
And I guess I should have said something about soybeans being on something that you have to watch out for on the bullish side. Because we're always just one weather hiccup away from a complete catastrophe when you're talking about the oil seed side of things. So, although today, we're still waiting on details or on China to confirm if these amounts that were touted by US representatives, if those amount of soybeans will actually be purchased, what some of the specifics are there. But the other side of it is that, while we're waiting for more US business to come to fruition, we have Brazil that is producing or set to produce yet another record crop. But the other piece of it is anytime that we see a major La Nina event that hits South American production, it really has a tremendous impact, or it stands to have a big impact on the bean market. And at the end of the day, U.S. not only or global vegetable oil demand that really is being driven by expanding biofuel policies and mandates And additionally, protein meal demand, so meaning the meal that we're getting from soybeans that we're crushing soybeans for meal and we're feeding that to livestock. Those things in themselves, it really doesn't leave the bean market a lot of room for a hiccup. So I think that's one thing that has to be watched. On the bearish side of things, we're swimming in wheat. And it's
Hmm.
been like this for a while as the market continues to, we had been grinding to new lows, and then there was some, rumors of and possibly a little bit of US China business that helped perk the market up a bit. But all in all, the world has plenty of wheat, and US wheat is priced uncompetitively in the world market.
Okay. Yeah, some of my subscribers recently made some money on wheat. It seems to get down to like 500 and doesn't stay there for much longer than a very short time. And then we got a little spike that they were able to take up on. Don't we get about 25% of our wheat from Ukraine? Was that interrupted with the recent war? What?
Yeah, and I mean the war that is ongoing. So what was that, early 2022
Mhm.
when Russia invaded Ukraine? Yeah, I mean that created really what happened when that whole when Russia did invade Ukraine and we had multiple trading sessions of limit up, because people just couldn't get out of, you can't get out of positions, and it's not until they keep expanding limits or take off limits at all that everything's finally able to get cleared out, and then you can kind of find some sort of level of normal again. But yeah, the world a, has gotten used to or adopted to the issues in the Black Sea really well. And even from a corn perspective too, Ukrainian corn actually is starting to finally, because they kind of had a slow harvest and a little delay to get going, but Ukrainian corn or Black Sea corn is finally starting to hit the market and present a few headwinds for US corn and export markets. But all in all, that entire situation, it's just amazing how you can still have the conflict going on. And it's impacted Ukraine's ability to grow a crop and export a crop, but the world has, for the most part, moved on.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, this is what it looked like on the chart. I remember when it was happening, and I should have just bought into this fund, and but that's what it looked like when you get a re-rating like that. Like you said, just limit up for days in a row, and yeah, some people made a lot of money. I wasn't one of them on that.
Yeah, I've seen more people lose a lot of money in wheat.
Okay.
There's so many old sayings about wheat, trade wheat, sleep in the streets, poverty grass. There's a lot of, wheat can be um, wheat can be one of, I think, the more difficult commodities to trade. Personally, I try to stay away from it because it's like there's always some sort of surprise that will get you. But I've seen a lot of people burned by wheat.
Okay. Okay. All right. Um, let's see. Chinese buyers are on strike and have not purchased any new crop grains for the first time in decades. Um, how do you see this getting resolved?
Yeah, so um, China, the last bushels of US soybeans that China purchased from us, it was, or the last that we shipped, maybe it was in May. So, um, now that the US and China have reached an agreement or a deal of sorts, although China has yet to confirm any of these details. The Treasury Secretary had been saying that China would buy 12 million metric tons of US soybeans in this calendar year, and then followed by, oh, I think the number was 25 million metric tons or something like that for the next, each year for the next 3 calendar years. Forgetting about the 12 million metric ton this year, let's focus on what they're touting as, this fantastic deal for the next 3 years. If that were to come to fruition, that would just get us back to it's actually slightly below the 3 year or the 5 year average of what we typically would ship to China anyway. So it's not a deal at all. Last time that we saw China come in and start to purchase uh, huge amounts of US beans after they finally reached the phase 1 agreement. We saw large purchases initially. We saw purchases only when it was advantageous from a monetary perspective. China, they're not going to be buying copious amounts of bushels when it doesn't make sense for them to. What's happened the past few weeks since we've reached this deal of sorts, or since US-China relations have improved, we've seen Brazilian soybeans become substantially cheaper. They've lost nearly $1 a bushel, and they're now cheaper than US soybeans. And we've seen China still actively buying South American soybeans, Brazilian beans, when they supposedly have this commitment to, this obligation to fulfill by the end of this calendar year. We've seen a handful of vessels trade, but nothing near what needs to actually happen. So yeah. So while the world would love to think that our bean problems are solved, it's still, I think we have quite the roller coaster ahead of us. But with that being said, I mean, it's also managed to rally futures $1 a bushel or so, which has been a windfall for the US farmer who has been waiting and waiting and waiting longer to sell anything at all, waiting on some sort of resolution with China.
Okay. All right. So China is basically going to where it's cheapest, which right now is Brazil. So that's where they're buying.
Yeah, and before this deal was made, I keep saying deal. China was actively buying Brazilian beans to the point where Brazilian beans were $1 more expensive than US beans. But when you're in a trade war and you're trying to avoid one country in particular, I guess that's what you'll do. So, the the biggest disappointment, I guess, out of this is now seeing that Brazilian values have collapsed so much. It's not just China that continues to buy Brazilian beans, but it's the rest of the world that's going to Brazil now to buy beans instead of US beans because we're so far out of the market.
What is there government intervention that is causing our soybeans to be more expensive, or is it just cheaper to do business in Brazil and there's not much we can do about it?
Capitalism at its finest. Yeah, Brazil is the least cost supplier to the world, and that's really led to, and because the world has grown accustomed to Brazil having large crops and a tremendous growing exportable supplies. The US has really gone from being the dominant bean supplier to the world to being the residual supplier. And it's unfortunate, but that's reality and that's how it goes. What's the Bill Bradley saying about becoming number one is easier than remaining number one?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Any specific commodities that we should be paying close attention to?
Um, I think that probably one of the most overlooked commodities is palm oil. Uh, Even here in the US, I don't think that it gets the attention that it deserves. It's the vegetable oil of the world, and its pricing, its movement has outsized impacts kind of on the rest of us, or on other, I should say, on other vegetable oils. So all these things are, and again, as we're looking at kind of the way that commodity markets are going, and I think that things that need to be paid attention to, again, we have these increasing biofuel mandates that are largely being met with biofuels that are produced from some sort of vegetable oil. So when you look at world vegetable oil consumption between the three big vegetable oils, palm oil, soybean oil, and rapeseed oil, which is also here in the North America, it's known as canola oil. So when you look at the way that the demand for those has increased, we're increasing each year biofuel demand at a rate of something like 2.23 times the rate that we're increasing food demand for vegetable oils. So that's becoming more important. I think eventually, if we see it, it's really not if, but when we see some sort of weather impact, we don't have a lot of room for error in oilseed markets right now. And the when you look at the oil side of things, and so I think the more vegetable oils that we are redirecting out of food to go into biofuel applications, I think that it will eventually draw scrutiny when we have some sort of supply crunch.
Okay. Palm oil.
We haven't Yeah, we haven't heard about the food versus fuel debate in a while. Things calm down as we've seen, commodity prices kind of moderate compared to where they were, say, 3 years ago. But I think it's something that's important to watch because these new larger biofuel mandates aren't going away, and it eventually will come to a head if we have a production issue.
Okay. Okay. Um, this is an interesting one. In one of your videos, you mentioned that you wake up at 4 a.m. every day. Does this have something to do with the commodity markets, or is that just a life habit?
Um, I I've kind of been forced to turn it into a habit with, let's see, my daughter's 6 now. So especially with her, I realized that it was important to get up early every day so I could accomplish things before she's up and kind of uh, ruins my ability to concentrate. But
Doing
the
what a
other piece of
six-year-old
it,
does best.
yeah, yes. I think the other piece of it is just getting into this routine of I'm able to be up. I have certain things, certain wires that I like to read, kind of get updated on. I'm very diligent about taking notes. I think it's just been a really important piece of kind of my daily process. And unfortunately, or I mean, I guess fortunately, because I enjoy what I do and I enjoy the fact that my day is okay, well, I'm learning something new constantly. And in order to stay relevant as an analyst and as someone who's speaking on and writing about timely topics, I'm constantly being forced to teach myself new things. And so I think that that's why having that really early routine has been good for me. Getting into the habit of doing something that's positive, although most people wouldn't think that 4 a.m. is ever a positive thing.
Right on. Okay, we got a question here from Kevin. He says, where do you see the most value for investors in the sector? The vertical integrated conglomerates like Cargill or ADM, fertilizer plays like Nutrien and Mosaic, or is there another aspect to the sector that you see um, astute investors making a profit?
Um, I think that it can be very difficult to uh, be a stock picker on the ag side of things. I think that ADM is a great example of this. They are spread out over lots of different types of industries that really reach outside of agriculture too. And especially with lots of policy changes, they just mentioned specifically that the lack of clarity in forward biofuel policy is one thing that caused them to um, adjust their outlook for 2025 lower uh, so recently. So, and I think I'm not certain. I think the stock that particular day closed down 6.5% or something. Um, I think that, things like that can make ADM is one of many companies that they're constantly battling new things, it seems like every day. And because they're so diverse, I think it can kind of make it challenging to pick a direction for them.
Okay. Um, let's see. Chain fires. Oh, he's got one follow-up here. Says my largest ag related position is a small cap partnership, UAN. Can you discuss the nitrogen fertilizer situation in Kansas, Missouri, and Illinois? Specifically, how do you see the demand for ammonia related products faring there with all the trade and exporting uncertainties?
I would not be qualified to answer that at all.
Okay.
Yeah. And even my ADM answer, I don't know that that's even really it wasn't even an answer. So, no.
Okay. All right. That's an authentic answer. Let's see. Alyssa wants to know, hi Susan, what do you think of the Moo ETF? So that's an agriculture ETF. It's got like John Deere and Nutrien and a whole bunch of other ones in
I
there.
didn't even know this is bad. I didn't even know that there was such a thing. I'm I am buried hardcore into futures markets.
Okay, okay. That's your main focus, not an ag
Yeah,
ETF. Okay. All
yeah.
right.
Sorry.
Okay. Um, let's see. Agricultural commodities, adjusted for inflation, have been in a downtrend for the past few decades due to increases in productivity. Do you see these productivity increases continuing?
Uh, yeah, and this is really one of the things that the U.S. has struggled with because historically the U.S. you produce too much, then by default it meant that you would have a large export program. And this year is a great example. We've planted a record um, acreage of corn. We're probably going to yield or have a record yield. We're going to have a record export program, and then we're still going to be swimming in corn. So it's been, I think that's one of the challenges, and especially on the bean side of things too, as the US, we're realizing that we keep producing more, but we also have increased competition from other markets. So for corn, Ukraine, Argentina, Brazil, and then on beans, predominantly Brazil, and then also Argentina. And it's presenting huge challenges for the US producer as we've somewhat maxed out our domestic demand, and now we're looking to try to get rid of excess supplies, and we're facing a lot of competition. And that's a lot of the reason that we've seen depressed prices is because we're not running out of anything in the world.
Okay. Okay. So there's a plethora of it. There's no shortage. So the price
Yeah,
gets hit.
and when you go back to, the last times that we saw major rallies in commodity markets, aside from when Russia invaded Ukraine, but you go back to its production challenges, which is really what lights up markets. So we haven't had a major issue here in the US in a while, but we've seen La Nina hit South America a few different times. And that's really what, in the beginning of the 2020s, that's kind of what really ignited a bigger rally was because we saw major production issues in other areas that help support prices. That's what drives beans to $17 or something, is when you have Argentina with half a crop or Brazil's production is impacted.
Okay. 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 Yeah, I remember that happened for a brief moment with coffee when they had that storm come through in Brazil and it wiped out a bunch of their coffee field. The coffee futures just went through the roof.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. The drought of 2012 impacted more than 80% of the contiguous United States. 2,000 counties were declared a natural disaster area by the Department of Agriculture. Soybeans soared to an all-time high of almost $18 a bushel in September of 2012, according to Trading Economics. Is this a cycle of droughts, you think, every 15 years, or what are your thoughts on that?
If you were in the mind of a US farmer, it's like 2012 is coming again every year because they love to talk about that because that's when that was the most profitable year for them, with crop insurance payouts. You know, on the drought side, really what 2012 did was it ran commodity prices through the roof and it encouraged production elsewhere. So if you look at when we really started to see some of these other nations ramping up production, it's because of high prices resulting from drought in the US, incentivized producers around the world to plant corn and soybeans. I'm not a weather guy by any stretch of the imagination. We've had some challenges here in the US, especially the past 2 years. We've had very poor finishing weather that have impacted crops. Um, but we haven't seen anything that's been I don't, what do you call the drought of 2012? The century drought or once in a lifetime? I mean, I was trying to buy grain at the time, and that's something I hope I never have to live through again. It was a very long year. But ultimately it really 12 or any big drought events like that, it just encourages more production elsewhere.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. If prices are skyrocketing here, then just free market capitalism. Some other farmer is going to do it
Yeah.
cheaper and start making a living from it. Um, okay, I didn't know this, but you organize you call them ag venture trips that seem to sell out pretty quickly. You got one coming up for Brazil?
Yeah, there are 20 of us. We're spending 10 days in Brazil. Looking forward to this one. There were 15 of us in the Panama Canal in January of this year. And so this will be February of 26. We'll be visiting the Port of Santos, largest port in Latin America, and then we will fly to the heart of Brazilian agriculture in Mato Grosso, and we'll spend about 4 days touring some of the largest farms in the world, corn ethanol plant, and some other facilities. So looking forward to it.
That's cool. That's pretty neat. That is pretty neat. Um, is there any how can I put this? Let's say we put you in charge of U.S. politics and policies surrounding agriculture. What are some of the things that you would do to kind of fix some of the hangups that you've been alluding to?
Oh, I did not see this question coming.
It wasn't.
Um,
This was impromptu, just me.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that, and I mean, for this administration, it's been moving at this kind of rapid fire pace with changes. And the issue is it's like shoot first, ask questions later. Um, and it really, I mean, it's impacted all areas of agriculture, and I think it's also impacted obviously other industries. But you can't plan for your business when things are changing every day. And then you especially can't plan for anything when the government says we're going to make these incredible changes to things. Like we're just going to upend or we're going to completely change the rules of the game. But it starts on this date and we might not give you the rules of the game until after the game already begins. And that's really I think the biggest challenge right now is the unknown, because there's nothing wrong with changing the rules, changing the way that you're doing things. But if you don't have those set in stone quickly, then it's just this agony and it weighs on the entire system. So instead of, I think we need more timely decisions, but the wishy-washy nature too is not helping a thing. What's the acronym? Taco, Trump always chickens out.
Yeah.
That we've seen, some back and forth, but it's just been chaotic with all of these changes, and it's like rapid fire changes that might be reversed the very next day.
Okay. Okay. A little more consistency instead of like you described it, shoot first, ask questions later. It's just
Yeah,
throwing
I mean,
stuff at a
it's just
wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, I think the kind of the funniest thing about the Trump administration and how things have gone, and it's not funny. It's maybe the saddest thing is the way that we were seeing that whole situation, just the optics of things. The wheels have fallen off the wagon. So the US producer was behind Donald Trump for the most part all the way through this US China mess, thinking that, China would quadruple its orders of US beans per Donald Trump. And we really started to see the support for him wane as we got into fall harvest, and producers are realizing bean prices are below my cost of production. I'm getting ready to harvest a crop. I haven't sold any of it. I don't necessarily have a place to go with it. So that's when things kind of got rough. And then as we got into the end of September, and not only did the US pledge support for Argentina, but they were there to help when Argentina said, we're going to have this export tax holiday to try to encourage an influx of dollars into the economy. And when that happened, commodity prices were hit hard because, again, this is a policy thing. If there's one country, and I'm not suggesting that this needs to happen, but if there's one country that the US, from an ag perspective, might be okay with just watching it fizzling and going nowhere, or watching the ship sink, it's Argentina. Argentina plays a critical role in it's often overshadowed by Brazil when it comes to ag, but Argentina is really important. It's the largest soybean processor in the world. It's the largest exporter of soybean meal, which is important to feed animals, and it's the largest exporter of soybean oil. So when things happen in Argentina, which they happen fairly regularly, markets can get excited pretty quickly. But when the US stepped in and was like, yeah, we're going to support Argentina, it was not only, we just rubbed salt in the wound for the US producer, who's sitting here trying to figure out, what do I do with my bushels? Because we just helped a competing nation. But then when we started, effectively supporting them financially, that was an issue too. And then really the nail in the coffin was when Trump started suggesting that maybe the US would be buying Argentine beef as a way to fix our supply problem here in the US. He just really alienated the last support I think that he had for him in agriculture. Now, since then, we have this deal with China, and everyone seems to be satisfied. But it's been such a roller coaster of emotions. And again, it goes back to you have the leader of the free world who's making policy decisions or what it feels like, just making these posts and things that have a lot of impact on what's going on with markets. And so it's created this incredibly volatile time, which ironically, we started seeing a reduction in volatility in markets leading up to the US China deal because it really had gotten to the point where the headline trading was horrible. And even seasoned traders were like, let me off this ride.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I watched a report on 60 Minutes um, last night about soybeans in America. They showed a bunch of American farmers and how Argentina is kind of taking over that market. But okay. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't? Anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask?
I guess not. I don't know. We've been all over the place.
Yeah, I kind
I
of took a
hope
shotgun
your
approach to this one.
yeah, I hope your viewers are able to follow.
Okay. Um, go ahead and tell us about your service, and if anyone's interested in following you and your work, how can they do so?
Yeah, you can visit my website. That's nobullag.com. You can find me on Substack as No Bull. And if there's a trial period, if you're also interested in consulting or the group trips, anything like that, you can find the info on the website.
Okay, we'll put all your links down below. Susan, this was a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for tuning in. Go to stevebartonmoney.com for more, and have a wonderful day.